All right. Good afternoon, traders. This is Chris from Tropic Trade Group, and this is your end of day video for Monday, June 9th. I'm trying to live stream this. I haven't done this in a while, so just bear with me a second. Let me see if this is pushing out to let's see if this is pushing out to Twitter first. I don't. Oh, yeah, right there we go. It is working. All right. So, I'm going to be fumbling around a little bit with the live stream, but I thought I would do this. I was trying to live stream, not trying to live stream, but I was live streaming about a year ago, and I just stopped doing it. But I'll do this from time to time. So, let me get to the matter at hand here. Today's recap, Monday, June 9th. We had kind of a mixed tape on our hands today. So I would say some positives, some negatives. Risk disclaimer in front of you. Everything that we're going through is for information purposes only, not giving any advice or recommendations. Everything that I'm going through in this live stream, this video, is for information purposes only. So let me go through the good and the bad for the tape today. I think that there was definitely some trading opportunities. Take, for example, what Bitcoin did today. It was up 4% for the day, very strong. Very interesting that this is kind of going along with what's going on in the commodity space too, particularly in the metals. So I will review that. One thing that was also kind of notable for the day, with SPY ending up slightly positive for the day, you also had the VIX go up 2.3%. So I'm not usually, I don't like that signal. I don't like when the market goes up as well as the VIX goes up. That is usually what we call a divergence. But you're not talking about really big moves at this point. And the VIX has come down, even with the VIX up 2% for the day, it's still at like a 17, which is a pretty low level. All right, so let me try to switch the screens now, because again, I'm using just a different app to do this. So I'm going to stop screen share, then I'm going to start the screen share, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to go to the charts, which are right here. So the rest will be charts here, but I talked about this. I think I have to turn this on. There we go. Again, functionality here. Just give me a second while I learn these things. So SPY, day two, number two days of being at this virgin point of control. So this is kind of, I think, important, somewhat notable, is that we hit a big overhead supply level. This is something that I've been talking about for a while on Substack. I post the SPY chart all the time, and I have been mentioning, hey, when we get up to this blue line, it might be logical for a bit of a pause. And so far, I'm not to say that there's any change in trend here, just be mindful that we're hitting a big overhead supply level. This VPOC has been generated from this volume profile back here. And so this is something that was generated off of the February time zone, right? And looking at where the most volume occurred is right at this virgin point of control. And again, oftentimes we see some digestion here. Just for an example too, this VPOC down here marked the low. Now we did go a little bit further there and kind of hung around there for a couple of days, but then we moved higher. So just something to be notable. I would then, so just because we get to an upside VPOC, I don't necessarily think, oh my God, we're going to sell off from here. What I would look for is some things that stand out. Now, I don't know if the VIX divergence is enough to really stand out, but I would be watching basically to see if we're still above the 5-period moving average and the top of the value area for the month, right? So this is the June value area. It's based on all of May's activity. 595 is the level to watch. Now, if we start breaking back into that value area, then we've got a little bit of a change in short-term trend. All right, so why am I bringing this up? Just so that we have a little bit of a plan of action in case the market changes a little bit, right? So that would be my first level in the sand. And depending on how you're trading, if you're trading more on the short term, then that may be a level to pay attention to, because the market might be losing some upside momentum. One other thing I would note too is I like to look at these the 1-hour charts for the value area, and also note that this is the value area for the week, which is based on all of last week's price action, and the resistance that we talked about in the weekend video, 600 spot 24. We were not able to get through that on the first attempt, and that's also the same thing as I look over to the Qs. We're also hitting, we also were not able to break higher. So again, not the end of the world. what could basically take us to the next, take us to trend higher and break out of the value area for the week. Well, we've got a couple events for this week. We just got through the Apple event, which there wasn't any major, big move from Apple on their developers conference. I think that was that was somewhat expected. There wasn't high expectations going into that, but there was so that really wasn't a catalyst. Also, when we're looking here at the Qs chart, 525.50 is your support level, short-term support level to watch. Also, same thing. We're still above the 5-period moving average. So, a little bit of stalling out here in the short term. Again, perfectly normal for the market to consolidate a little bit. I just wanted to bring up, I mentioned the VIX as well. I don't usually like to chart the VIX, but just looking at where we are, and again, even though it was up 2.2%, we're sitting here with very low volatility. Could we be getting some type of, bout of volatility soon? I think that's in the cards. Like I don't generally try to anticipate that when there is going to be that bout of volatility, but it would not surprise me if we got it here. And I would look to some of the events that we're going to get for the rest of this week. I just want to preview that, and then we'll go over some single stocks in just a second. But for economics, couple things to watch. Tomorrow we don't have any major economics tomorrow. On Wednesday, we're going to get the CPI report where they're expecting 0.2%. And then you're going to get on Thursday the PPI report. Also, the expectations month over month is plus 0.2%. So that's something, as we're kind of sitting and consolidating a little bit, that could be something that either punches the prices out above that SPY VPOC that I mentioned. Also something to be cognizant of. Last week there was no bond auctions. This week there are 3 bond auctions. Just to kind of note, if you're not familiar with them, they occur at 1 o'clock. And they, depending on, it's new supply that's coming onto the bond market. So depending on how those auctions go, you may get some volatility, particularly if those bond auctions do not go well. So we're going to start with tomorrow. We're going to get the 3-year bond auction, then on Wednesday, the 10, and then on Thursday, the 30-year bond auction. All right. Very quiet, I would say, in bonds today. But again, maybe that will kind of change as the week gets going. TLT was just up 10 basis points. I want to talk a little bit about Bitcoin. This was interesting that there was a bit of a shakeout there on Thursday. And full disclosure, I was long Bitcoin. Sometimes when we're looking at technical setups, when we see something that's so clear and obvious to us, this to me looks like such a nice check back to the 20-day moving average, starting to build back up, which is where I got involved in this. A little bit of a check back Wednesday of last week, and then kind of just a dropout in the price action. However, one of the things that held there was the bottom of the value area, which was 57.52. Now, hindsight 2020, and I went over this in the weekend video because I review trades that go well and I go trades that don't go well, and what I would have done a little bit differently. Instead of taking off the whole position, what I could have done is just take off half the position. But I set a stop with that trade. It hit the stop price, and I got out of that on Thursday. But regardless, heck of a nice reversal. And you could also call that like a shake them out type candle, which we saw that in a bunch of charts. And again, that's unfortunately, like if you're looking for charts to be perfect and nice and clean, it doesn't work that way all the times. The market likes to kind of get people off sides, shake people out, and that was a pretty good shakeout calendar, a shakeout candle on Thursday. That's when momentum got hit a little bit, but very nice move. I want to look over. So what I didn't go back into Bitcoin today, and I do have a Bitcoin position in the TTG trend portfolio that I don't try to kind of, hit every turn perfectly, and that works fine. But I do like what happened with MSTR today. This is also, I think, going back to what I just said a minute ago, that if you were looking for something, perfect and neat, right? A lot of times you're just not going to get that. I think a lot of people were realizing when MSTR consolidated here that this was a potential bull flag. It did not break the right way. It broke to the downside. again, probably shook a lot of people out of this the MSTR trade as it broke the 20-day moving average, and short-term traders pay attention to that, myself included. But it spent about a week and a half kind of going sideways and is now starting to turn higher, right? So Bitcoin shook everybody out. I don't want to say shook everybody out because some people stayed in and some people are long-term, long-term holders, as I am in one of my accounts. But it wouldn't be surprised me if this starts to get going again. So I gave this a shot. Nice defined trade here as we broke into the value area. This should trigger the bullish 80% rule, by the way, which means that there will be an 80% chance that that this will follow through all the way to the top of the value area, which is about an 8% move. So I gave that a shot. All right. Another theme that I wanted to mention for today too is what's going on in the precious metals. So I think it's kind of interesting how this works. When you look at the weekly chart of gold, right? We know that this gold has made one heck of a run the last couple of years. Speaking of neat and nice, this was a nice little triangle pattern that happened at the end of the year, and then we continue to rally. Now, we're also consolidating right now. We don't know which way this is going to go. Just like I always tend to think things will go in the direction of the trend, but nothing says to happen that way. A lot of people have been waiting for silver to get going, like over the last couple of years, watching this move in gold, right? And you can't force things, right? Sometimes you just have to kind of wait for it to happen. But what is happening, what's been happening over this last week is you do have a breakout in silver, right? And it's seeing a lot of heavy option activity. It's a nice break higher. I do see this VPOC that's up here, 2.3%. Notice the last time we approached one of these, we got rejected and kind of came back down. I'm not saying that's going to happen there, but it is a level of interest, right? Always the VPOCs are a level of interest, right? So silver's has got going. Also, what I covered towards the end of last week is it's not just silver, right? It's a lot of commodities that are starting to move. Platinum, palladium are going. So this is the PPLT. This is the ETF that aims to track palladium. Reminder that there's futures that are tracking this. So you just kind of have to be careful of the slippage, but that's a really nice breakout of this, right? The next one, now I did not put this on last week. I looked at it. It was one of those things. I was kind of, I was off half the week last week. I was basically trading half days. So that had something to do with why I didn't pull the trigger on that. But I did pull the trigger on palladium, and I looked at this again on Friday. But what's really nice here is when you zoom out, right? So not just by looking at the daily chart, but going over to the weekly chart. Now, we don't know how this week is going to end up, right? We're just at the beginning of the week. But right now, it's the beginning of the week and we're breaking out of the value area for the year. So a couple things I'm going to mention about this chart. Palladium was very hot going back like about 5 years ago, was trending. You were able to kind of trade this over and over. It set up several times. Real nice, trending chart. But it began to kind of break down in 2022, 2023. Also, like this is a very good exercise at looking at how names that have been in downtrends for a couple of years, how they usually come out of a downtrend. They usually don't just have a V recovery. I say usually because that's the way it works. Nothing is 100% of the time, but usually you don't have a V recovery. Usually you have, a level 4 decline, level 1, where you base for a little while, and then you begin to kind of try to break that, break that sideways range, that base, as it tried to do in 2020, towards the end of 2024. It got rejected right where there was resistance. And I don't think it was ready yet, and if you look at the difference, by the way, in the moving averages, right now, you could see that these moving averages are all coiled together, right? And when you have coiling in a chart, right, that usually means that there's a big move coming. And so that's what I'm in this trade for, breaking of the value area. Also, another thing, notice if you read this value area, I know it's kind of covered, the wording is kind of covered up here, but it says high volatility expected. Why do we have that written down? Because just like with the coiling, with the moving averages, when you have a very slim value area, that means that there could be a big move that's coming, right? And it could be in either direction. So I went long, and I'll be watching to see if this maintains above 95.17. One other thing that you're probably noticing on this chart too is look at all the volume, right? Look at the volume, what's been going on over the last year. It looks like folks are starting to get excited about this move. Look at the volume last week. So again, I'm on the weekly chart, so this volume bar is for 1 week. But again, the volume is confirming there, right? And again, volume is very different when we look at single stocks or an ETF like this versus the overall market, right? The overall market usually goes up. Again, this is very counterintuitive and it messes with people, but when the market's ascending, like SPY Qs, the volume is usually low, right? As we're grinding higher, right? Because there's no major selling going on, right? But it's different when you're looking at a single stock or something like this. When you're breaking out of a region, you actually want to see volume accompany that breakout. Again, it doesn't always have to happen, but it's kind of nice to see that, hey, people are taking note and there's people that are positioning into this. So where am I looking for this to go to? Well, there's a VPOC up here. So again, this is more of like, this isn't hopefully it won't be a short-term trade, meaning I don't get, that price doesn't reverse here. But I would be looking for a move up to 130.85 long term. That's up 32%. Also note that there's some things to watch here in the shorter term. There's a couple of these VPOCs up here, so I will be aiming for them as well, and that will probably be places to kind of trim. So again, all I'm doing here is setting up. I don't know. This is not predictive. All I'm noting just the game plan, the roadmap of where I'm planning to take targets and where the trade won't work is if it breaks back into the value area for the year. All right, moving on. That's a lot about the metals, but I think that's one of the interesting things that's going on. Another theme that is going on is the uranium stocks, which are acting pretty decently. Uranium has had this really nice move. This started to kick higher all the way in the beginning of April and has made a really nice advance. There's a VPOC up here at 37.8. CCJ, I believe, is the number one holding this, had a heck of a day, up 10%. And I think you can kind of look at some of the other names too in this. Oklo had a good day today. Again, kind of looks like a little like a cup and a little bit of a handle to this. Your support is going to be 47.37. SMR also, and this one I put on the watch list this week. I liked the chart a little bit better in SMR. So this looks pretty good here. Also, just a nice little cup pattern and just a little bit of a handle here. Again, these things don't have to be perfect, but I like that last week when it kind of checked back, it checked back right into the to the top of the value area. So that looks pretty good to me. And I think a bunch of other things, obviously, some of the aerospace names acted really well, right? You should not be new to this move that's been happening in aerospace and defense. This has been one of the strongest areas. I saw a lot of people talking about how the industrials broke out, to new highs. Well, what do you think's powering the industrials, right? It's the aerospace and defense names, right? So rocket, so you have to be careful with some of these things because they're intertwined with what's going to happen with Tesla. And we heard today that Trump mentioned that he's not canceling any contracts with not SpaceX, but the internet company. So you have to be careful with some of these headlines. Rocket Labs got off to a nice start. If you happen to go long Rocket Labs on Friday, you got paid today. It was up 2.5%, but went all the way up to 32. Rocket Labs kind of acts like that. The other story out was that there may be some deregulation in terms of some of the drone names as well as some of the flying taxi type names. So that got ACHR going. That's made a nice move today too, up 10%. So again, these themes this has been intact for a while. Joby made a nice move today. That was also up 13% today. And there's obviously a few other names. Also, another name too that looks pretty good to me is Boeing. Now, you may say to yourself, and this happens, I get to, you hear this a lot. Oh, I can't buy Boeing up here. It's already made such, people look in the rearview mirror and they're like, oh, if I could have only bought it there. All right, well, you have to kind of think ahead, right? And where do you think the company is going to? Now, I actually started a trade in this today because I like the little check back here. So again, you got to focus on what's at hand, right? Because first of all, the company's not back at 52-week highs. You know, and there could be more good news being announced for this company. If there's an announcement with China buying Boeings, that should propel the company further. Also, it's a just neatly defined trade here. The breakout here in the beginning of the month and check back to the top of the value area, that's all, that's where my stop is, right below here. And then we'll see if this wants to continue to trend, right? There's no rule that says it's not. There's nothing predictive that says that it's not going to continue to move from here. And basically, if you really want to put this in perspective, the stock is basically coming back to levels where it was back in here. So that's my thought process for Boeing. So ultimately, I'm going to keep this first live stream kind of short. I'll also figure out how to take eventually how to take questions on here. Maybe we'll do some chart requests. But ultimately, you know, I think that that there's plenty of themes that are still taking place here. And I think, you know, watching where your support level is, noting that we're hitting a little bit overhead supply, being mindful that we've got some events this week to navigate through. So I'll leave it there, guys. Have a great rest of your night, and I'll see you tomorrow.